You're gonna have to be my emotional support dog for this video, bub. Whether you like it or not. What's up? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. As you can see by the title, this is my NICU experience. And if you don't know, I have twin baby girls that were born in June, so they're about 6 months now. So I've put off making this video for 6 months. I don't know why, but I just felt compelled to sit down and film this. I'm trying so hard to formulate my thoughts and like start this video, and I have so many things that are like flooding my mind and so many things that I want to say, and I'm putting pressure on myself right now to start this perfectly. But ultimately, I just want this video to be another way that I can connect with other mothers or parents out there that have a shared experience with me. And in this case, you know, we may share the NICU experience. If you have not gone through this experience, you just probably don't understand it. So I also want this video to serve the purpose of raising awareness for parents that have gone through the NICU. I think there are so many people that start their parenthood chapter, you know, with a child or children in the NICU, and it's traumatic, and it's a trauma that I think is going to live with me the rest of my life. And it's something that, to be honest, I've felt like I wasn't qualified to sit down and talk about, because my girls spent only 22 days in the NICU. And to be honest, I had a lot of people, I'm already getting a little bit emotional. I had a lot of people say to me, you know, when my girls came home, like, wow, you're so lucky, like they were only there for 22 days. Like, you know, that's a blessing. Like, it must have been better than you expected to only have them there for that long. And I know everyone's intention was so good by saying that to me, but those 22 days felt like 10 years. And I'm gonna get into it in the video, but it was the hardest 22 days of my life. And so although it was only 3 weeks and a day, it is something that, again, is just going to live with me forever. And I have a best friend that had a child that spent just a few days in the NICU, and that trauma still lives with her. Like, I think it's just, when you start parenthood as a NICU parent, and I keep saying parent because it's a mother and father. It's not just, this is not just addressed to mothers of NICU children. I watched my husband experience really, really dark times during this NICU stay as well. And so I just want this video to be a way of raising awareness and also of connecting with other NICU parents out there, because I had no idea what I was getting into before I started our time in the NICU with our daughters, and I wish I had a better understanding. And there's really nothing you can do to prepare, but if anything, I hope that this video just creates a place for us to come together, or for you watching to just feel a little bit less alone, because I felt so alone when I was in the NICU with my daughters, and it's such an isolating experience, even though I had, luckily, a partner. I know a lot of people don't even have partners when they have a NICU stay, but we're both individual people processing our time differently. We both had no prior experience with having children to begin with, or children in the NICU, so it still can be really isolating even if you have someone to lean on. While I spent those days in the NICU, I journaled a lot, and I journaled not in the traditional sense of like pen to paper, but I just kept writing down my thoughts and feelings between pumping and trying to navigate motherhood. In those early days, I needed an outlet, and I wrote down a lot. This video is going to be me looking back on these notes, and to be honest, I have not looked at them since I wrote them 6 months ago. So that's also why I'm really anxious, and I'm worried this video is not going to be perfectly organized, because I'm assuming my thoughts and the things that I'm writing down are not going to be articulated beautifully, but I think that's okay. And this is really raw and a way for me to relive the experience now that I feel like I'm ready to do that. However, I do just want to kind of put out a trigger warning that if you are a parent that has children in the NICU right now or previously, or if you have a high-risk pregnancy like I did and you know you will probably be in the NICU, like, this might be really helpful and I hope that it is. But if you think that that's just too much, like, I just want to put kind of a trigger warning that maybe this video isn't for you, but hopefully it is. Let's just get into it. I think that if I remember correctly, I wrote a lot of these journaled notes in a way that I wanted to connect with other mothers, and I wanted it to feel like you're not alone. So I think a lot of this will be about certain experiences that I went through that I just wish I knew about beforehand. Let other mothers know, like, I felt this too. It's okay. You don't have to feel guilty for how you're feeling right now. Like, I feel it too. And so that's what I think the sentiment of my journal notes is. And a lot of it is just like, I'm going through this right now and I need to write it down. So I'll do my best to organize this, but that's all just my disclosures that this might be a little all over the place. And last thing that I wanted to note was that my pregnancy was high risk. So again, if you are new and you haven't followed along all of that part of my life, I had a monochorionic diamniotic twin pregnancy, which is where your babies, your twins, share a placenta. And so it was high risk. Towards the second half of my pregnancy, I was seeing doctors twice a week, then 3 times a week. I was admit to the hospital like 2 or 3 times for possible early delivery. Like, it was really a very scary pregnancy. And so I was already just in a really fragile place going into my daughter's birth. Let's open this notes app. I titled it Dear NICU Mama, which will likely be the title of this video. And I did follow an account while I was in the NICU called, I think it's called Dear NICU Mama, and it helped me so much while I was in the NICU. It helped me feel so much less alone. Like, I would just open that and look at other mothers going through the same things that I was. That was a really nice sense of community for me at that time. And I thought the idea of Dear NICU Mama resonated well because you just feel a little bit less alone when you hear someone addressing you in your current state, like being a NICU mother. If you're a NICU mother at any point in your life, you're always a NICU mother. I did write that I first want to say there is absolutely no way to prepare for the NICU. We were fortunate enough to know before birth that our babies would be spending time there, and we thought that would cushion the blow, but it did not. And that's something that I definitely want to express. I know there are mothers that have absolutely no idea their child is going to go to the NICU, and then it's extremely traumatic when they do, and that is so valid and so scary. But just because you have an idea that you're gonna spend time in the NICU, it doesn't prepare you for the experience. Like, I knew that my girls would be going into the NICU. I delivered at 34 weeks, but what I thought the experience would be is not what it became at all. I wrote, NICU Mama, I hope that you understand that nothing prepares anyone for the first few moments you see your baby in the NICU. They go from the home you built inside your belly to an incubator. As a mother, you're not able to hold them and soothe them when needed, and it's a pain unlike any other. And like, again, my mind even immediately as I read that goes to them being born, and just in general, having babies that you carried for so long be swept away from you, not put right on your body. You hear them crying and you can't go to them. Like, it's the happiest moment of your life, but it's so not natural. I get so emotional because I just want to go back and like hug that girl on the operating table. And to go from such a high-risk pregnancy where I was just like fighting to keep them in my body, trying to keep them safe, constantly not sure if they were growing, and you know, just leaning on my body to protect them for so long, and then they're here and I'm serving no purpose anymore. That's just how I felt. And I felt like all I wanted to do was like hug and protect them, and they were just like gone in a matter of 5 minutes, out of my sight, out of my body. It's just hard, and I know that it's like normalized in a lot of ways that this happens, and especially with C-sections, it's okay if you still were traumatized by the experience. Okay, I promise I'm not just gonna cry this whole video. This is not like organized perfectly, it's just the things that I wrote down. So I wrote that as time goes on, you somehow get used to the incubator, which is the home that your babies live in while they're in the NICU. And you never forget the first time you see your children in these incubators. It's extremely sterile. There are cords everywhere. You can barely, like my daughters were so little, I could barely see them beyond the cords. And there's nothing like seeing that for the first time, but you do eventually get used to it. And I wrote in here that I felt like I didn't know how to care for my baby because of all the cords. You have to learn, like I had to learn how to change their diaper and take their temperature through cords, and learning how to maneuver the cords to get to them is the only way to touch them or to care for them really was through these two little holes in the incubator. I'll never forget one time where I walked in and they were under like the bilirubin lights because they were jaundice, all things that you learn if you have babies. I didn't know about all this stuff beforehand, I just didn't. When they're under these lights, you're not supposed to touch them, interact with them or anything, and they spent like days under these lights. And at one point, I don't remember, I think it was Rennie had just spit up and she was like choking on it, and it was very traumatic. Like no nurses or anything had come in to like get her. I walked into it and I didn't even know what to do to help her because I wasn't supposed to go in and, you know, touch her while she's under these lights. But I didn't, and they cover their face with they cover their eyes with these protectors because the lights are so intense. And I just remember being so angry that no one was helping her, but I'm her mother and I'm supposed to be the one helping her. And she was covered and she just looked so uncomfortable. I had to like ask a nurse, like, can I go in and help her? Because I didn't want to like interrupt her like therapy time under the lights. And an example of just feeling so helpless in the NICU, and I felt guilty because I'm supposed to naturally know how to care for my children, but I felt like I didn't because it didn't feel natural to me at all. There were like rules attached to how I could care for them, and cords and lights and other people that I needed to rely on to not have them be covered in throw up, for example. And to me, it looked like they were she was choking, and I'm like all over the place with this specific example, but it's just because this was one of the first few days they were in the NICU, and I just remember it so vividly, and I remember feeling so depressed and just so helpless. But I wrote in here, dear NICU mama, I know how long it's been since you've gone a day without crying. Like I remember feeling like I literally have no tears left to cry. Like I have just let everything out, because that's another thing too, and this I guess is the portion that's directed only to mothers. You are going through the biggest hormone dip of your life. Like when you have just given birth, your hormones completely dip. And I remember the incredible women that took care of me, the nurses at labor and delivery, had kept telling me like, wait till day 3, wait till day 3, like your hormones are really gonna drop and it's a dark day. And that was like the worst day of my life. It was so bad. And then it was bad for like a week after that. And so I'm navigating this new experience in the NICU and also these new hormones that are dipping. And I say this because I didn't know about this. I don't know why. Like, I don't know why I didn't know that it was like this bad, but I was the most depressed I've ever been in my whole life during that first like week postpartum. And the thoughts that I was having, a lot of them like I can't even say out loud, and I felt so alone. But looking back, like I know how normal that is, and I hope that it's helpful for you to hear that if you eventually give birth, because I had no awareness. Something that I didn't say is that I gave birth in Boston, and my daughters were in the NICU while I was there for 5 days. And then they gave us the option when I was being discharged for my C-section recovery after 5 days. They gave us the option to allow our girls to go to a special care nursery closer to our home, so we didn't have to drive into Boston every day. We had the option to stay in that NICU or go to the special care nursery at home, and we chose to have them closer to home. It was easier for us to get there. And so on day 5, they had to transport the girls via ambulance to the hospital closer to our home. And again, this was like day 5 for me postpartum. My emotions were just like, I had no control over them at all. And I'll never forget seeing them put into these this glass box. It's an incubator that's meant for like travel. They wouldn't allow me to go in the ambulance because I had just had a C-section, and that's like super dangerous for my recovery. And that was like so hard. So we just followed them the whole way home, and like following your newborns in an ambulance is like not fun at all. And so that day was like so hard, and we went to the hospital, stayed there with them at the special care nursery all day. And that night we had to drive away from them. Like, we didn't stay there overnight. Like, I was starting my breastfeeding journey. I was pumping every 3 hours. I was putting the babies to my breast. Like, I was doing so much, and we needed to sleep at nighttime. And so we would go home for like 6-7 hour stretches, and driving home from them that night, day 5, driving home, leaving them at the hospital, is like a trauma that you also will never get over. Jonathan says that like walking to our car that night was the hardest thing for him because of the state I was in. He had said he had never heard me cry like that before. In our whole relationship, he'd never seen me the way that I was. I don't even really remember it. Like, I think I literally just like blacked that out. I felt like a zombie saying goodnight to them and leaving. Like, I had them with me for 9 months, and I'm driving away from them, and they're not, in my mind, okay. Like, they're still struggling. They're still learning to do all these things that a lot of babies are born knowing how to do. All this to say that leaving was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but it was the best option at the time. And so I know a lot of NICU parents struggle with like leaving their children at the NICU, but you have to take care of yourself in that really fragile time. Ugh, that was really hard. I also wrote in here that I know the strain it puts on your relationships. I mean this, you know, in the sense of your relationship with your partner. Like, if you're fortunate enough to have a partner go through this with you, it is so wonderful to have someone to lean on, but it also puts such a strain on that relationship. It's such an emotional time, and every human being handles emotions differently. It just puts such a strain on that relationship. And so if you're experiencing that, you're not alone. It also puts strains on your relationships with family members. I know that we had a lot of family that wanted to meet the babies and wanted to see them even when we got home from the NICU, but we lived with that trauma and that experience for so long, even after they were home, that I truthfully, if I could go back, I would have kept people away for even longer than we let them in when we came home, because I was not ready. Like, I was not in a place where I wanted anyone touching my children other than me. I already was told way too many times that I couldn't hold my babies, that I couldn't have the experience that I wanted, that I just wanted to be home when I was eventually home and just be with them, and that's okay. And if you are in that situation, like, do what is best for you. The strain on your relationships goes away. I mean, my girls are thriving now, growing great. Family sees them all the time, and, you know, because they're healthy and they're okay, that at the time I wish I could have told myself, like, you're not ready to let go of this control that you have right now after not having control for so long, and that's okay. So the strain that it puts on your relationships, like, that will go away. So I don't remember if I talked about this in my last video around the birth, but I'm not sure if this is like a universal term that is used at every NICU, but for us, we were told that our babies would have what was called episodes or spells, and this for me was the hardest part about the NICU, bar none, hardest. Our girls would have these spells where they would just stop breathing, and it would happen when they were sleeping, it would happen when they were feeding, and it is the worst thing to witness ever. And I didn't know they were having these things. I didn't know that this was something that was common in NICUs. I didn't know anything. And I think that's also because nurses, who are the most incredible people on the planet, literally, and they are rock stars, and they are doing this constantly. And to them, spells and episodes might be totally like normal. Like, we know what to do to save them in these moments, so it's not a big deal. But I remember it was like day 2 or day 3, and no one had told me that my babies are periodically not breathing and they need to be assisted in those moments. And I remember walking in to the girls' NICU room, and there was just beeping, and there's constant beeping, and I'm sure I wrote this down in my journal also, that the beeps and the sounds, like, I can still hear them. I hear them in my sleep, I'll hear them in the shower. I think it's a form of trauma. But there's constant beeping, and when things are going wrong, and heart rate and respiratory cycles and all these things, they just track on these big monitors in the room. And when there's 2 babies, it's just so intense. You know the patterns, you know what's good, what's not good, you know when something's beeping in a bad way. And I remember hearing like beeps and seeing red on the screens, and a nurse running over to Ren. No, this was actually Sienna, and I didn't know what was going on. I remember the nurse, like, Sienna was sleeping and like not responding at all, and the nurse had to like lift her up and like pat her back and rub her back and say, Sienna, come on, you got this, girl, come on, come back. And I just remember being like, what? Like, am I watching like my daughter? Like, I didn't know that this was like a thing. And apparently, because they're just so premature, they just like get into such a cozy sleep that they just like stop breathing. And like, just, oh my God. And I learned that this is common with preemie babies. Their lungs just need to learn how to like breathe on their own. And so I talked with the nurse about it. I had a complete breakdown. I didn't understand what was going on. And I asked the nurse, like, show me what you just did. Like, I need to be able to do that if I'm here and she's having an episode. Like, what did you do to like revive her? And the nurse showed me. And so for the full 3 weeks and a day that our daughters were in the NICU, they continued to have these spells, literally until the day before they left, which is also so scary because I wanted to go home so bad by that point. But I was like, are they even ready? Like, they're still having these spells. But the nurses showed Jonathan and I what to do when they would stop breathing, and how to like notice that happening and how to get them to start breathing again. And luckily they eventually stopped having spells while they were sleeping. Those are the scarier spells, because when they're feeding, it's a little bit easier to kind of notice. They'll like cough and the buzzers will go off, you can really sense it. But when they're sleeping, it's just something that's a little more concerning. The doctors made us aware of that. So it was good that eventually they only had these spells while they were eating. Regardless, it was so scary. And I'm saying this all in this video because I wish I knew about this beforehand, and I wish I knew that like they were gonna outgrow it and they don't have these spells at all anymore. They only had them for like a week or 2. No, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks. When they were home, they would have these spells, but we knew what to do. You learn quickly. And yeah, I like haven't thought about those breathing spells in a long time. I wrote in here that the fear of getting a phone call from the NICU never goes away. This is something that applies if you do choose to go home at nights, or, you know, if you have to work. I know some parents still need to work while their babies are in the NICU, and you have to do what you have to do. And I know that fear of getting a phone call at any time, it just never goes away. The whole time they were in the NICU, I kept my phone on standby, and any phone call that I would get from like a number I didn't recognize, I would answer in 0.1 second. And I was just so afraid constantly of getting a phone call, because again, like, your first 3 weeks as a mother, you just don't think that you're going to be relying on like a phone call to get updates on your child, or that your child's not safe. Like, they're supposed to be with you, and it's just not. Keep saying it, it's just not natural. And the next kind of thought I had here is around like breastfeeding, and I actually am going to film my breastfeeding journey, I think after this video, if I can emotionally handle it. But I wrote that I know how hard it is to keep pumping and not be able to feed directly and have that connection with your baby at first. It makes the pump so hard with no reward, but once your milk comes in and their little feeding tubes only fill with your milk, it is rewarding just in a different way. And that's another thing, you know, while my daughters were in the NICU, they could not feed like via mouth to nipple or mouth to bottle. They had feeding tubes, and they start on formula because I didn't have enough milk really at first. Actually, I did, fortunately, because I was pumping like every 2.5 to 3 hours. I had the colostrum and the milk, but they gave them formula regardless, just to really get their weight up because they're so little. But starting day one, I had colostrum, and they would just rub colostrum like on their cheeks. And colostrum is that like liquid gold milk that you get when your placenta leaves your body. It kind of triggers your body to start creating milk, and you have colostrum first. And they would rub it on their faces because they couldn't eat or anything yet, but they were getting the benefits. And then I just stuck to pumping, and again, just so emotional. I don't have my child with me, which actually makes it harder for your body to create milk. So Jonathan would take a lot of pictures up in the NICU room, and then when I would go back to my room to pump and I would be like sobbing, I remember he kept like coming over and would just have pictures and videos that he had taken of them like on my phone, and he would scroll and have me look at those while I would pump just to help create more milk and like stimulate my body. And so I know how hard that is, and if you're experiencing it, like, it is all worth it. Once I could finally get my breast milk supply up, and they were able to put my breast milk into their feeding tubes, like, it was so rewarding. And no, it's not rewarding like I'm sure it is when you have your baby latched to you and you get that bonding experience. I'm going to talk about it in my breastfeeding video. That didn't work for me, and I tried for 2 months, but you're still so proud of yourself for any way that you can get your milk to your baby. I must have been having a good day. And I wrote, I also want to know how good those days feel. The ones where there's no episodes, progress is made, the doctors have big smiles telling you how strong your baby is and that they're getting better every day. Those days give us NICU mamas life. That must have been a good day. And it was always hard because every time there was a good day, there was always a not so good day eventually after. And it's a roller coaster ride, but there are good days, and your babies do progress. And those days feel really, really good. So I actually had a really good piece of advice before going into the NICU, and it was to keep to myself. And that's hard because I'm definitely someone, obviously, even through this YouTube channel, I'm someone that likes to connect with other people. But with the NICU, I was told by a NICU nurse actually to keep to myself, because eventually you could start taking on other people's like emotions or experiences, and you're already going through enough. And also, not everyone's NICU experience is positive, and really bad things can happen in a NICU. They just can. And I'm just saying that because it's best to obviously smile to other NICU parents that you see and do the best you can to uplift each other. But starting to chat or build relationships with other people, like, it can get hard because they might be going through something really traumatic one day when you're having a good day, and vice versa. And it's just not a place to like create friendships. And I don't know if that advice is good for everybody. Maybe some people really would have thrived off of connecting with other people, but I chose to like stay in my little bubble with my family, and that worked really well for me. And so that being said, I wrote, I know how hard it is to see other mothers in the NICU and not know how to soothe them when they're not having a good day. How hard it is to hear another baby cry while yours is finally at peace. A piece of you goes and sits with that other mother and hugs her. And I like remember when I wrote that, and I remember like feeling so guilty because our daughters were having a good day and this other mother was alone, and like her baby was just not doing good. And it's really hard because in NICUs you have your own like pod, but you're by no means alone. Like, you are so in a room with other babies and other mothers, and like, oh my god, the sounds of like crying babies is just like constant. And yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard. I'm getting to like somewhat of the end here, and I'm trying to just give the spark notes of some of these notes because I get really in my feels at some points. But it's my journal, some things I'll keep to myself, but pretty much everything I'm talking through with you. I wrote, life feels like it's completely stopped and it's so isolating. There's no way to participate in anything other than the care for your child. And when you're away from them, you just feel guilt, which is all consuming and again, isolating. It's so crazy. It's like your first however many days postpartum, you get some sleep, right? Like I didn't have newborns in my bedroom with me, so I was sleeping like 4 or 5 hour stretches between pumps at home before going back to the NICU. And I remember waking up just feeling so guilty, and instead I should have been like appreciating that I'm getting sleep or whatever, and all I wanted to do was just get right back to my baby, but I had to pump, and it's just this pull of emotions that you feel, and there's no right or wrong way to do any of this. That's something that I hope I'm making clear. I'm just trying to express the emotions I felt so that hopefully, you know, if you're feeling them too, or you have felt them, you know that you're not alone. And I still feel guilt sometimes when I think about certain periods of time during our NICU stay, and yeah, it's this crazy push and pull, but there's no rules. And that applies to all parts of motherhood. You do what is best for you to survive, and the guilt that comes with so much of being a mother is insane, and it shouldn't be the case. And hopefully videos like this can allow us to feel a little less alone in our guilt. And then I wrote, while you're in the NICU, it's so hard to take 5 steps forward and 3 steps back. I mentioned it already that there are really good days and then unfortunately kind of tough days that follow that sometimes. I remember as we were getting close, we were in our 3rd week there, and we were starting to get glimpses of hope that we would be able to bring the girls home. And then you just don't let yourself get excited though. It's like this huge moment that Jonathan and I would talk about, like they might be able to come home soon. Like you start getting excited, but then you go in and they have another episode or another spell and it's delayed, and it's just such a roller coaster. And as I mentioned, like the girls were having spells up until the day before they went home. And I remember they had a spell like the day before they went, and you're not supposed to be able to bring them home, but the doctors were like, we think they're okay. Like, you know what to do if they have the spell at home. And I remember being like, I want them to come home so bad, but there's a part of me that doesn't, because what if they're not ready and I'm not ready? And that was just the worst feeling. It's like you're so excited to finally have your baby in your bedroom and you feel unprepared, and it's just like, it's so scary, and it just is horrible. I remember we stayed up late. I wrote this, I forgot about this actually. We were told one night that the girls were going to be able to come home the next day, and so we stayed up all night packing and getting everything ready, and we were like just so excited they were coming home. And then we got a call at midnight that they had a spell and that they weren't going to be coming home the next day. And I just remember both Jonathan and I like getting into bed and just not talking and just feeling so horrible. And it was the first time that we actually got excited to have our family all together at home. Like, we didn't even let ourselves envision that at all. Even while I was pregnant and going into delivery, you just don't want to let yourself be excited because you don't know how much longer it's going to be until that special moment comes. But it does come eventually, and it is wonderful when you do get to bring them home, but it's a journey to get there. I must have wrote this the day we were bringing them home, but I wrote, I'm more scared to bring them home than I was to deliver them. No monitors, no nurses, no reassurance. The crutches you develop in a NICU are nothing to be ashamed of. I was so hands-on, and I still knew I relied on the nurses' advice and guidance constantly, so the fear that I have to only trust my own intuition is so scary. You do develop crutches, that's a good way to put it, and now you're on your own. And I know that a lot of this that I've talked through has been really dark and not something to look forward to if you are going to be a NICU mother in the future, but I can say now, like looking back, that right when those girls came home, that mother's intuition does kick in, and you know, we thrived together here, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I was so scared. Like their first 3 months being home, honestly, I was so overly cautious. Not even overly, I was just cautious. I was a mama bear. You got this, like you can do it. I was so nervous, and it was like second nature when I had them home. I knew what to do, and you figure it out. You figure it out, and no one can care for your child better than you can. And yes, you need nurses, you need all of the medical professionals at that time when your babies are born, and they need all of that, but you're their mother or you're their father, and you have to trust yourself to do everything that your baby needs, because you will do it, and you'll do it perfectly with some mistakes along the way. I wrote that I understand that the trauma of the NICU never leaves your body, even though so much time has passed. I'm 6 months post NICU experience now, and I mean, just reading through all of this, it's very, very traumatic to think back on, and I don't think it's ever going to leave my memory. And it's like a physical reaction that you have when you think back to it, because it's just the most vulnerable time of your life, and you are in such a traumatic space that it lives with you, and that's okay. Also, sorry, this light is just beaming in. It's just giving me a little ray of sunshine that I need right now. So, okay, so that was really the last journal entry that I had written. I did end with, the NICU will always be part of your story, but now your healing can begin. And everything that I just talked through, again, I had wrote when I was in that vulnerable place and when I was experiencing all of these things. And I want to end this video with saying that you do heal, and I feel like I heal every day. As hard as that experience is, it builds so much resilience within you, and it allows you to feel a strength like you've never felt before. And there are so many beautiful things that came out of that NICU experience for both me and my daughters. They are so strong. They are so strong, and their strength was built in that NICU. And so I'm so grateful for that experience. And I just want to thank, again, every single NICU nurse that is out there, because you're miracle workers. And I needed you in those 22 days. I just want to end the video with saying that for me in my situation, my daughters are 6 months and they are thriving. And I did not see this light at the end of the tunnel while I was in the NICU. And I know everyone's experience is different, and some babies aren't thriving at 6 months, and some babies are still in the NICU at 6 months. My heart is with you if you are a mother that is still in the NICU for however many days it's been. I hope that you eventually get to that light at the end of the tunnel and you get to be home with your babies, because there's nothing like it in the whole world. And as hard as that experience is, it doesn't take away from the beauty of having them home when that day finally comes. So as always, thank you for watching my videos. Thank you for keeping up with me, and I'm just so grateful for all of you and all of the love that you constantly give to me. And I hope that through these videos I'm able to give something back to you. And I just love you guys, and I'm grateful for you, and I hope this was helpful. And I'm gonna have my breastfeeding video up soon, and my birth story if you want to watch. And then I do have a lot of fun, positive, happy videos and vlogs where you can see our girls thriving, if that's of interest to you too, on my channel. So definitely subscribe and stick around, and I will see you in my next video.
I dare you to be wilder. I don't fit into your box. Beauty queens without no flaws.